So good evening, everyone. My name is Derek Keats, and I'm one of the founders of Learn the Birds, together with Etienne Marais, who's one of the speakers in tonight's webinar. And we started Learn the Birds as a means to bring together people with knowledge about birding, whether it's about the intricacies of the hobby of birding, the process of birding, whether it's about birds themselves, whether it's about photography of birds, anything to do with birds. So anybody with expertise in any of those areas, together with people who want to learn more about birds. And this evening we have two of our best, I think, bird sound experts in the country, and they're going to be spending some time with us talking about bird sounds and the love of bird sounds. And I see Etienne has just disappeared.
I'm here, Derek.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
This version of Zoom updated today, and the interface is sort of a little bit changed. So I'm going to hand over to you, Etienne, and you can do the introductory honors and everything, and get things going. Are you ready?
Yes. Thank you very much, Derek, and welcome to everybody to this webinar on For the Love of Birdsound. This is something that I've been very passionate about in my birding life for many years. And we thought, way back, people will remember in June and July, I ran together with the Facebook page Bird Calls of Southern Africa, a survey on people's favorite bird sounds of Southern Africa. And this was very interesting. We got some very interesting results. And a couple of people have been bugging us about doing an update on, what the results were. So the thoughts were to team up with Rick Nuttall, who's going to be joining me tonight to talk about the love of birdsound. Now, Rick, for those of you who don't know him, is a veteran in ornithology. He was head of the museum, the National Museum, for quite a few years, worked as an ornithologist, very widely published. His first love are waxbills and white-eyes, as far as I recall. And Rick is a sound maniac, I think, much as I am myself, and extremely knowledgeable about bird sound, and also someone who's a very, very keen recordist. So welcome to Rick, welcome to Learn the Birds. And let's
Thanks
see
very much, Etienne.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do, just by way of kicking off, is to share my, with this new Zoom interface, to share my screen. And we have some PowerPoint slides and some sounds. And we're going to talk about these surveys, the results of the surveys. And we're going to talk about just what makes bird sound so great and why it's so fundamental to birding, well, as we see it. So without much ado, let me try and share my screen. Just hold on a second there. Okay, how does that look? Can everybody see the screen?
Yep, it's working.
Okay, so essentially what we're going to do with this presentation is just to say thank you to photographers, Hadaram, Derek. We've used quite a few of your images, and then a few others, especially all the people who've joined me on my amazing trips to share bird sound. And I think we have to say thank you to all the recordists out there, the incredible resource that is Zeno Canto, for example. So what we're going to cover would be introduction about us and our love for bird sound. We'll talk a little bit about ourselves and how we got into it, myself and Rick. And then we're going to cover the survey, which was on the favorite bird sounds of Southern Africa. So we'll share the results and talk about what the outcomes of that survey were, what people said about the sounds, etc. And then the second survey, which was run just in the last week, is the favorite sounds of Kruger. And again, we'll talk about the discussion. We'll talk about the highlights, what people found, and some of the findings of that. And then I think we'll just have a discussion about what makes bird sound so important to us as humans, why it touches the very heart of who we are. And then we're going to, I think, move on to sound birding in general and discuss how to take your sound birding forward. Rick is a very fanatical sound recordist, enthusiastic, and he's going to talk about how he uses his recordings and also give feedback on a bird sound recording workshop, which was held in the Karoo recently. And I'm going to share some tips on learning bird sound. So about us, I'm going to kick off and just talk about myself. This is me in Standard 8, the one in the middle showing the belly button. And that was a school trip. I was fortunate enough to go to St. John's College, and I managed to persuade the biology department to invest in a parabolic reflectors and sound recording equipment. And there we are at Moss Dean Nature Reserve. But to go back just a few years, when I started birding at the age of 7, my mentor, a gentleman by the name of Guy Berry, Dr. Guy Berry, the very first time he took me out, he said, "Young man, it's not bird watching, it's birding, because more than 50% of what you do is bird sound." And he introduced me to the process of recognizing bird calls, and I became a young fanatic at the age of 8 years old. One of my first birthday presents was a vinyl, a record, an LP record, which was 30 calls of the Kruger National Park. And I think I played that so many times that it literally wore the needle down on the LP player. So here's just one of the iconic sounds. Can you, everyone can hear that, the woodland kingfisher? And I'm going to, just before going on to that, I'm going to just ask Rick to talk about himself and his background in bird sound. Rick, over to you.
Great, many thanks, Etienne, and hi to everyone who's joined us in this webinar this evening. I see a number of familiar names. Hi to you all, friends, and to those I don't know, thanks very much for joining us. Yeah, anybody who knows me and my birding will know that I do a lot of birding by ear and thoroughly enjoy it. I say to people, my environment is a very acoustic environment. Sometimes I have to remind myself that not everybody has grown up listening to bird calls and learning bird calls since an early age. So you know, if I refer to something or I say to somebody, "Oh, listen to that," I need to just perhaps pinch myself and remind myself that filtering out one particular bird calling out of a cacophony of bird sounds is actually quite something, and not easy. So my experience of birds and bird sounds started also at a very young age. I remember the exact occasion when I was encouraged by my mentor, Mr. Lorraine Mullins, who was a school teacher at my school in Grahamstown. We were on a Dyer's Cross Bird Club outing at Alexandria Forest down in the Eastern Cape, down near Kenton, Boknes, and what a wonderful forest habitat to bird in. But so I was very keen on learning my bird calls and got excited about birds calling, and I heard this very strident calling coming from deep in the forest. And I asked Lorraine what it was calling, and he said, "I'm not going to tell you, you go and find it." And so I snuck off into the undergrowth and quietly tried to find the source of the sound, and eventually found a diminutive little bird with a cocked up tail, and it was what we then called a bleating bush warbler, now known as a greenback Cameroptera. And those of you who know the call of this little species and its greyback cousin will know how loud a sound it makes for such a small bird. And I'm not talking about the bleating call, but that very strident sound that sounds like two rocks, little stones knocking against each other. And I think I was 11 or 12 years old at the time, but I'd already had some experience of learning bird calls. Yeah, and I think that I've just had a very keen interest in birds and their sounds and the sounds they make and the context of those sounds. So bird behavior as well. This is something that's fascinated me throughout my life and throughout my birding experiences. I started recording bird sounds in the early 80s. Had a wonderful trip as a student up to the Okavango swamps, and Dr. Hamish Campbell, a well-known birdo from Durban, who was also our family doctor at the time, lent me an old cassette player with an old tie of his, which was the strap, and that went over your shoulder. And he lent me a nice directional microphone that I took with me on my first trip to the Okavango, and I still have that recording. Of course, in those days it was all analog tapes, and I have recently embarked on systematically digitizing my entire analog collection, and that's a long process, but it's been great fun to rediscover these sounds. I'll probably talk about it later in our discussion, Etienne, but I think fast forward to today, and my music, I tell people my music that I listen to in my vehicle when I'm driving, and particularly on long trips, is soundscapes. Many of these are my own recordings, and as I think we'll discuss, and as many of you who are listening will attest to, sound takes you straight back to places and brings back memories. And I find it a wonderful way to reconnect with places I haven't been to for a long time. And yeah, to just keep on my toes with regard to identifying birds by sound, by playing recordings that I've done in different parts of Southern Africa. So it's a great resource. It's something that I really enjoy. It adds tremendously to birding, to my birding, and to my experience. And yeah, I simply love nature sounds and soundscapes. And I'm very pleased to have been invited by Etienne to come and chat about sounds, bird sounds this evening. Thanks, Etienne. You're still you're muted, Etienne.
Sorry, I have to find Etienne and unmute him. I wasn't expecting that.
So thank you, Derek. Thank you, Rick, for that introduction. I'm going to go back to sharing the screen, and we'll talk about the Kruger Park survey. So we're going to go back to, where is that? Okay, so essentially the favorite bird sounds of Southern Africa was a survey run just using Google Forms in July and August, and we eventually had 240 responses. And the questions we asked were basically background on how long people have been birding for, you know, where they've birded. Most people birded all over Southern Africa, and the majority of the respondents had also were pretty experienced. And we gave them the opportunity to list up to 10 favorite species in order from the most favorite to the 10th favorite. And quite a lot of people actually went all the way to 10. And amazingly, I think what was most interesting was that there were a total of 288 species. But in first place, not surprisingly, is the African fish eagle. And that's probably the well-known African bird sound among not only experienced birders, but sort of even complete non-birders. And then in second place there, we had nightjar. Interestingly enough, this is, I think, a sound that evokes the feeling of being out in the bush, around the campfire, perhaps. And then in third that survey, we had the woodland fisher. That is basically a survey of birds, the whole of Southern Africa. But I think I'm going to just share with you in a different format the entire list. So what we actually did was we scored the birds according to 20 points for first place, 17 for second, 14 for third, and so on. And just to share with you the species that we have on this list: Birchall's cuckoo in fourth, Cape robin chat, gorgeous bushshrike, white-browed robin chat or Hughlins robin, black-crowned chagler, black-headed oriole, southern boo-boo were the top 10, followed not too far behind by orange-breasted bushshrike, Scops owl, red-chested cuckoo, emerald-spotted wood dove, African wood owl, Bok McKerry, African emerald cuckoo, southern ground hornbill, pearl-spotted owlet, and eastern nickator, filling out the top 20. But I was quite fascinated also to look at some of the birds that were suggested here or chosen. And some people made comments and said, you know, I'm embarrassed to say that it's a Cape crow or a kelp gull, as the case may be, red-billed firefinch, southern fiscal, common garden birds like speckled mousebird. Someone put Angola cave chat, which happens to be one of my favorites as well. And what was really fascinating is just the diversity of what people came up with in terms of their favorite sounds. And I was, to be honest, surprised to see a couple of people choosing something like batelier, crab plover. Really, there's a whole list here. But to go back, I think, to the top birds, and just let's go back to this presentation. How we want to do from current and continue on through there. The survey was, so that's the Southern African Bird Survey, and I've got, not in the presentation, but just here on a, you know, some of the things that people said for completing the survey. You know, it was really interesting, the comments. I think a lot of people expressed concern that it was very, very difficult.
Sorry, Etienne, can I interrupt you? Unfortunately, the sound is clashing between the bird and you, so we can't hear you very well.
Okay, let's just move on. Sorry, I'm not going to talk about Kruger Park sounds quite yet. I'm just talking more about what people said in terms of, you know, their actual comments. So I think a lot of people said it was very, very difficult to choose, and certainly I had the same experience myself. Because wherever you think about in your life, if you think about a particular time or a particular trip, there are different favorites. And certainly my own experience is that over time, with different experience, those favorites change. And my own feeling was that, for example, when I was younger, something like the gorgeous bushshrike was really right up there. But more recently, I think I've now put my favorite bird sound as melodious lark, just because of the incredible diversity of the sing and the amazing process of the actual, you know, the actual mimicry that goes on. I was just out yesterday up near Marais and hearing this melodious lark mimicking a whole collection of swallows and swifts, like as a theme, whereas the bird next door, not too far, was doing a lot of African pipit and African quailfinch and various lapwings. And it's just incredible how, you know, how these different birds actually have these complex sounds. So perhaps to bring Rick in there, you know, and just to comment on you know, your favorite sounds and what you think of what people have said in terms of the Southern African survey, if you've got any comments to add. Rick?
Yeah, thanks very much, Etienne. Yeah, I think that it's always fascinating to hear people answering that question. You know, what are the favorite sounds, and particularly hearing their motivations. I concur with you that you know, one's favorite bird sounds can definitely change with time. I find it very, very difficult to pinpoint or to you know, select my favorite species. You know, as you mentioned earlier in the introduction, I really enjoy the small seed eaters, the waxbills, 5 finches, mannikins, those groups. And I've, you know, I think by default, I've trained my ears without really realizing it to really focus on those higher pitched sounds. And, you know, hearing a sweet waxbill giving us a little, you know, courtship song, which is a very, very close court, you know, a song phrase, sounds uttered at very, very close quarters. You need to be very close to these birds to hear them. I don't know how many people have actually experienced that, but and then going on to particularly the birds that mimic a lot. You've already mentioned the melodious lark. I mean, I'm amazed at you know, at folk in Europe who believe that the marsh warbler is one of the finest mimics. I just think that we haven't really marketed the mimics that we have in our own region, because we've got many that are just astounding, and the quality of the mimicry, and the range, the diversity, the number of species mimicked. I use an example of a sabota lark that I recorded many years ago. It was a single male. I recorded it. The one recording that I analyzed was a 10-minute recording of a single male in the Western Free State. And when I analyzed the recording of that 10-minute soundbite, I had 59 different species, 49 different species mimicked by the single bird, 59 different vocalizations. So sometimes it was contact calls or flight calls and song phrases or snippets thereof, alarm calls. And I mean, that was just 10 minutes from one individual. So absolutely remarkable. Yes, you know, I think favorite sounds for me are very much related to experiences, to memories, to wonderful memories of places visited, places where I've spent time, places where I've spent time with, you know, with great friends, great birding friends, experiences that have been shared. And yeah, I think that having surveys like these two, Etienne, that you've been involved with, I think are great in creating an awareness, making folk think about sound, about the bird sounds that they experience. As I said earlier, and I say this with absolute humility, just because I've birded all my life, you know, with sound as the backdrop to my birding. But I think that many people still haven't discovered the wonders of sound, of the sounds that birds make. And there's a wonderful acoustic world out there waiting for those people who haven't yet discovered, or who are just beginning to discover that. Yeah, the iconic sounds of you know, of the bush are, you know, notable for being included high on the list of favorite bird sounds. And I think it would be quite interesting to look at more experienced birders, people who've been birding for quite a long time, who've maybe visited, you know, different habitats, different parts of our region, and to try and see, you know, what differences there are in the choice of favorite bird sounds.
Okay, thanks, Rick. As that, I think let's move on. We're going to talk about the Kruger survey, but before we do that, just to say, I think, you know, for me, sounds are closer to, you know, although the world is very much moving in the direction of, you know, the importance of everything visual, and you know, that visual tools and technology is so prevalent. In a way, sound is more basic to our emotions. It's closer to our emotions. So when I think back on the memories that certain species evoke, you know, this is a remarkable sort of thing that I can remember. Red-eyed dove, which didn't occur in Johannesburg when I was a child, but in the early days, it always used to remind me of East Griqualand and the family farm near Kokstad, as did Cape Canary, those lovely, sweet singing notes of Cape Canary, would always make me feel nostalgic about the visits to the farm down in the, down in East Griqualand. And then later on, the sound of the somber greenbill, the Willie, come on, have a fight, you scared, was a sound that always brought back memories of childhood seaside holidays. Growing up in Johannesburg, we never had any Willies. We didn't have the somber greenbill. So it was always a reminder of those great times when you were off on an adventure with your family. It was the best time of your life. So I'm going to share the screen again and pull up the presentation. And then we're going to talk more about the Kruger survey. The Kruger survey was co-hosted by the Facebook page Kruger National Park, best place on earth, and it's still ongoing. I think we're going to leave it out there for quite a while, because although the page has got literally 70 to 80,000 members, it takes what am I doing? Sorry. I want to view this as a slideshow.
Shift F5.
F5, yeah, sorry.
From your tech support team.
Now it's gone back to the start. Doesn't matter. We'll whiz through to where we were.
Yeah, it was Shift F5.
Okay. And it's still ongoing. I think we're going to leave it up there. At the time that I downloaded the results this afternoon, there were 83 responses. But what was interesting, and I think this was in common with the Southern African survey, that most of the people that responded were experienced birders in the context of Kruger birding. In other words, they indicated they'd been birding for longer than 15 years. And once again, amazing diversity with 149 species featured. And this time the woodland kingfisher pipped the African fish eagle and came in first place. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the other species that we had there on the survey. So just in terms of where people came in, the 7.7 is very casual but love nature. And then we had people who bird, these orange colors bird mainly when they're in the Kruger keen birders for less than 5 years. And then look at that. I mean, we basically got 70% upwards, 80% upwards have birded for at least 5 to 15 years and mostly for 15 years, which I think is very interesting. And once again, the woodland kingfisher comes up in first place. And just to look at what in sequence, although, look, a lot of people say you can't really choose a favorite, but in sequence, the favorite bird sounds of the Kruger Park were woodland kingfisher, African fish eagle was pipped into second place. African scops owl was very popular. I think Kruger Park is a place where the lovely prut of the scops owl is found in the camps, and people are familiar with that. And the same with furry-necked nightjar with a T. And then emerald-spotted wood dove, gorgeous bushrike, monotonous lark, interestingly enough, came up quite high for an LBJ. I think it's the first LBJ to feature on any of these lists. Black-crowned chagrin, orange-breasted bushrike, pearl-spotted owlet, southern ground hornbill, which is definitely one of my personal favorites, and southern yellow-billed hornbill. So that's the Kruger list. We haven't really had time to analyze it in a lot of detail, but I do have in front of me some of the comments that we asked people why these particular sounds are, so important to them. They speak of the bush of Africa, most of them melodious and all belong to striking birds. Reminds me of being in the bush. Memory of loved ones, sounds associated with bush and farm. I chose a corset because the corset is funny. They're all symbolic of the great outdoors in our beautiful wild country. Association with nature and the Kruger Park. I don't hear the woodland kingfisher at home, so it's a special sound I associate with summer in the Kruger National Park, somewhere special in a camp. Crested francolin is such a simple campsite species, but that is exactly the point for me. They are iconic to the area. I come from Cape Town, don't hear them very often, so they always tick the box in relation to my memories of the Kruger. They remind me of peace and tranquility. And the sounds evoke a deep longing. So once again, the emotive feelings, a deep longing for one of our favorite places on earth. The connotation of the sound with the places you hear them most, they indicate happiness. They just evoke a sense of Africa and being at a special place. The southern ground hornbill is so deep and rich. It always reminds me of being in the wilderness. Loud, distinctive, typical of the Lowveld. Most of them remind me that I'm in nature, away from the bustle of the city. Remind me of special time spent in the Kruger Park, and I don't hear them where I live. The black-bellied bustard, it has a completely unique call. It also makes me laugh. Most of these calls remind me of a special place, person, or memory. When I hear them, I know I am in the bush. The familiar calls epitomize Kruger Park for me. These bird calls all evoke treasured memories of being in Kruger. It's a combination of factors, but for the most, it is the memory it recalls and the emotions felt when I hear them. The call of the emerald-spotted wood dove would create a nostalgic remembering of that trip in 1997 to Punta Maria, the first trip to Kruger since I really started birding. And finally, who doesn't love a fish eagle? The summer and it's green in Kruger. To me, it's the sound of the African bush, majestic, wild, and beautiful. The African bush, I think that's a common theme throughout many of these responses. And I think a lot of the people hankering for the Kruger Park, if they come from the Western Cape, talking about how special it is to remember those holidays. And when I hear these birds, I experience being in one of these camps. It takes you back. Remind me that I'm in heaven. So it's the pleasure and the wonder, typical of the bushveld. So that is basically a summary of the favorite bird sounds of the Kruger National Park. And I think we can take more questions on that, and we'll certainly post more in-depth analysis of the different species. I can share also a more complete list of what was actually on that list. No, this is the Kruger list here. No, this is the list. Sorry, that's the list for the whole of Southern Africa. So I'm not going to share that now. I think let's move on to essentially talk about the sounds again. I've done it again. Sorry. I'm still learning the LibreOffice commands. It's something new.
It's the same as PowerPoint, Shift F5.
Right, okay. So I think I'm going to ask Rick to come in here again and just talk about it. But I think one of the themes that comes up is the memories and the emotions, which is why bird sound is so important to us as human beings. I think those responses from the people in Kruger really capture so much of that. So I'm going to ask Rick to come in there and comment on what we just heard. Rick?
Yeah, thanks, Etienne. I agree, and as I said earlier, I think that much of the time we don't actually realize how important sound is for for us, the sounds that we are hearing, and it's only later on, perhaps when our memories are jogged by hearing something, that we are taken of the importance of sound. I've heard people saying, people take photographs, and photographs are wonderful recollections of being in a place, of seeing things. But to me, I think that, if you close your eyes and you just listen, that sound, in fact, paints a far richer picture than a photograph ever can. So for me, that's my personal experience, and I would wish that that many other people would really learn the art of listening to enable them to benefit so much more from from our bird life.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Thanks for that comment. Yeah, I think if I can just maybe talk a little bit more about some of my favorites in both surveys. When I think about them, one of the birds I put down for the Southern African survey was Victrin's warbler in the Cape. And it just reminds me, you always hear it, you know, at the time when everything's in flower, and in August, July, August in the Cape, when I've been down there. And you have this wonderful smell of the fynbos and this fresh air. And, you know, it's that time when, after the rains, when everything is green and growing and flowering. And that wonderful sound of Victrin's warblers just captures to me, it almost evokes not just the memory of the place, but the smells of the place. So sound being a very base function in the human brain, the fact that it works, it's a primitive process to recognize sound, to have all these sound patterns in the brain, and they bring back memories and places, because the process of listening to sound is so close to one's emotional core. So Victrin's warbler would be one of those things. And then for me, my favorite bird, in fact, Trevor also did a survey and asked what's our favorite bird, and that had to be melodious lark, because it is associated in my own life with so many key things. So when I was a young birder and living in Pretoria way back in the 90s, I went out jogging, and I didn't have binoculars, but I was going through the veld near my house in Moreleta Park. And there was just this sound in the sky of a lot of birds. And I then realized it wasn't a lot of birds. It was the melodious larks, a couple of them mimicking a whole mass of birds. And melodious larks create the sort of wall of sound around you. So that was an incredible experience, finding those melodious larks in a new spot. They weren't a bird in those days that we saw, that we knew where to find that. I'd only seen it once before, down in the Free State of Pretoria's Game Reserve. And I put it out. There was a newly established SA BirdNet, and I put it out on the forums. I think it was maybe Pretoria Birds, saying, yeah, these melodious larks in Pretoria East. And you know, this is where, and people wanted information. I put my phone number. And I got a phone call that evening from a young boy, I can only describe him as. And he was very polite, and he asked me in very polite English if I would do him a huge favor and show him and his friend where these melodious larks were. And the motivation was because it's a lifer for us. And that young man was Fancy Peacock. So that's how I met him. And the melodious lark became, you know, one of the sort of highlights of our friendship in terms of the books that we worked on together, Marafra Publishing. And then later on, and when we did Birding Big Day, I recall we went out very early in the morning to do a recce, myself and Fancy, and we were literally just trolling through high-veld areas from maps and trying to find a good spot for high-veld birding to start our dawn chorus. And we picked the sort of point in the Vlaklaagte grasslands, as they're now known, which was the highest point, and we just went there at sunrise. And we thought, well, maybe there's a lot of birds around. And when we got there and we got out of the car and we had a cup of coffee and we started listening, it was wall-to-wall melodious larks. And that was like, we looked at each other, and it wasn't just melodious larks. There were lots of other birds. There were lots of clapper larks and fawn-colored larks, and there were cuckoo finches flying by, and there were white-bellied korans, and there were all sorts of things. So, but it was just the melodious larks. They captured that moment better than anything else. And then if I can move on and just talk about my favorite bird sound more recently, I couldn't decide whether it was a white-chested alethi, which is just brings to me that feeling of those lowland forests down in the Catadas in central Mozambique, the Zambezi Basin, when you go out early in the morning and you hear that beautiful haunting trill of the white-chested alethi. The ghost bird, incredibly difficult to see, but very exciting bird. And then more recently, perhaps the nickertal, that incredible bubbly, explosive sound, is something that always brings back memories for me of being in somewhere exciting. So let's head on back to our presentation, We're going to go through a couple of different topics and talk more about sound recording and how to improve your bird sound. So basically, we've spoken about memories and emotions. Yeah, and then just to talk about taking your sound birding forward, I think we're going to talk about that. And I think I'd just like to ask at this point, there's been some people that have really contributed to the discussion about sound in Southern Africa. And one of them is Lynette Rudman from Grahamstown, who set up a Facebook group called Bird Calls of Southern Africa. I think I've got it right, which has really been a fantastic Facebook group where people post, you know, they post videos, they post sound recordings, they ask questions, and the group has encouraged people to you know, to really do more recording, to listen more, and so on. So I think Lynette is with us. I'm going to stop sharing and just ask Lynette to come in there and just ask her to talk a little bit about why she set up the group and her sort of view in relation to in relation to birds. Why she always talks about how important bird sounds are. Lynette, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Welcome, Lynette. Lovely to have you here. And I'd just like to say, you know, with everyone present, congratulations on setting up one of the best Facebook groups in relation to birding in Southern Africa. And
thank
you
yeah.
for all the work you've done to promote an awareness of bird sound. But I mean, maybe just to kick off, you know, why did you start the group and what's important to you about bird sound?
Yeah, well, I started birding about 8 years ago, seriously. And the people I birded with was like people like Justin Nicolau, Tim Cocroft, and quite a few others. And bird sound was just part of birding with them. It wasn't a separate thing. So I started learning the calls with the IDing of the birds, you know, with the visual IDing. So it just came naturally that I learned the sound and ID'd it by sight. I've never actually ever seen bird sound as a separate thing. And it's quite foreign to me that some people are too scared to learn the sounds because, you know, they don't recognize it. I mean, for instance, you'll hear a bird in the bush and you won't see it for a while. And it was so important for me to like know what bird that was. So sound came with sight with me and all the people that I birded with and that I still bird with even now. I tend to stick to people that know sound like I do. I'm not an expert at all, but I like to bird with like-minded people. Not only like visual birders, but people that are also auditory birders. The reason why I started the group in 2016, I think it was February, was I realized that not many people seem to be interested in calls at all. And at that stage, it was only Tim Cocroft, Alan Collett and myself that ever posted calls in that group. And for 2 years, that group just dragged and dragged along. And I think we had about 50 members and there was no interest. And I kept saying to Tim and Alan, I think I must just close the group. You know, there's a lack of interest. And then just suddenly people started realizing that they can post calls that they've recorded with their cell phones, like movie mode and that. And suddenly it just exploded. And I'm actually quite chuffed. There are like 5,000 members. And I think about 100 are very active. And it's quite cool. People are definitely finding that learning calls is quite important. And it's part of birding. It's not a separate thing. So yeah. So that's how my passion for learning sound started.
Thank you very much, Lynette. Yes, that's fantastic. Just also to let people know, Lynette's also got a YouTube channel, which has got some really nice collections of different bird sounds, you know, and ways of learning different groups of birds and so on. Really a nice resource if you want to learn the bird sounds. I think we're going to move on, and I'm going to ask Rick to come in on his whole experience of sound recording. I think he mentioned earlier that that's his music, but perhaps tell us a bit about how you know, got into sound recording, Rick.
It wasn't so bad.
And also, you know, I think if we start there. I do a bit of sound recording, but nothing like Rick. So he's really, you know, he's really someone who's serious and passionate about recording sounds.
Yeah, thanks, Etienne. Sound recording, my sound recording equipment is pretty much the same as my binoculars. Essential equipment for my passion, my hobby, and it was for my work as well. When I did my studies at university, I was looking at courtship behavior in waxbills, and as I mentioned briefly earlier, the songs of waxbills in that context was very important. And so from my university days, I managed to get hold of some recording equipment through University of KwaZulu-Natal, through the zoology department there, and was able to record and video record the birds that I was studying. And the sound linked in with the different movements and behavioral postures proved to be quite important in a study of that nature. And I think whenever I've done any kind of research from then on, there's always been a sound component. Other studies, other research projects that I was involved in, started working at the National Museum in Bloemfontein as an ornithologist. The one was looking at the different, at that stage, white-eye subspecies, Cape white-eye subspecies, and work that I did on, particularly on what is now the orange river white-eye, was incorporated into the work done by Graham Oatley for his PhD on actually splitting the orange river white-eye from the Cape white-eye. So sound was used by me in research for research purposes, and I produced sonograms and did different analyses based on the measurements of different elements of the sounds that I'd recorded, and which then comprised the sonograms. So it was an important research tool for me as well. And I think and then it's just also because I've always enjoyed sound, I just started building my own collection. And whenever I had the opportunity, I would whip out the sound recording equipment and add that to my collection. While at the museum, I had access to a really nice Sennheiser shotgun microphone and a Marantz cassette recorder. And at that stage, my own personal equipment, I just had a little directional mic. It was a teched microphone that I bought from Weisel's in Durban as a student. And I had a little handheld Panasonic cassette recorder, one of these small ones. And I did a lot of my early recording using that. And then I discovered the parabolic microphone made by Neville Smithers of Broden in Johannesburg, and managed to get hold of one of those, for my own personal use, and I've been using that ever since, and continued using my little Panasonic handheld cassette recorder. And then when digital came into being, I then upgraded to a mini disc recorder and did a lot of recordings on my mini disc recorder, and that was a Sharp. And most recently, I've moved to a Sony PCM M10 digital my Broden parabolic mic. Having a collection of sound is great, and as I mentioned, I listen to my own recordings as well as other recordings and CDs that I've collected over the years. I used to have my CD player when I was still a bachelor. I used to have my CD player as set on as my alarm in the morning, and I would have a lovely soundscape that would wake me up in the morning, and it would gradually get louder. So and that soundscape was mainly birds, but so that's pretty much been the evolution of my sound recording. But most recently, apart from using my own recordings in my own research and in to assist others in research, now I'm starting to contribute my own recordings and my older recordings as well, including my digitized tape recordings from analog tapes, to this wonderful resource that you have mentioned, Zena Canto. And we talk about bird atlasing as giving a real sense of purpose to bird watching. Well, Zena Canto really gives a sense of purpose to sound recording, and I'm sure those of us who submit our recordings to Zena Canto will all agree that it's a wonderful repository to be able to pass on our recordings to, and for those to be available to anybody else anywhere around the world for pure listening pleasure or for research purposes if the recordings are of a good enough quality. Another thing that I've found, and I say this to people who are wanting to learn bird sounds and to identify birds by sound, we need to familiarize ourselves with the sounds of the birds around us. And one way of doing that is not only to listen, but to actually record. And, as Lynette was saying on the Bird Calls of Southern Africa Facebook group, it's great to see people posting recordings that they've done in their gardens on their phones. And there's usually very often a little video that goes with it. But just focusing on the sounds that you don't know, recording them, and then sharing those sounds with people, asking for assistance with identification of those sounds. I think all of that is part and parcel of teaching ourselves, but also not only teaching ourselves, but also learning the sounds of the birds around us. And just to carry on from that, if you are really wanting to identify bird sounds, it's a wonderful idea to start recording bird sounds. And you don't have to get expensive equipment. As I said, you can use your phone. But the wonderful thing about recording sounds is that the extra effort that is being put into that process, the association of where I saw and heard the sound that I didn't, or heard the sound that I didn't know, and then the whole process of sharing it, getting it identified, that just reinforces that sound in your mind and in your memory. So I see that there have been some questions, in the chat here about how, is there a framework that we can use to learn bird calls? And recording sounds is actually a very, very useful way of assisting with learning to identify birds by sound. And it's the whole process of association, of going back to that sound, of reinforcement of the sound that you've heard and you didn't know. And I think that can be captured very, very well by sound recording. And who knows, people who start recording birds just for the sake of trying to identify them, later on they could become hooked on sound recording. I know one or two people. Tony Archer is one of those people who started off recording sounds just to identify them, but he attended our sound recording get together in the Karoo a few weeks ago, And he just commented to me to say that, you know, there's so much more than just identifying birds from the recordings that he has. He just so enjoys being able to capture the essence of birds, and it just adds a whole new dimension and focus to this wonderful hobby that we have, that is birding. Yeah, sound recording. So that's pretty much how I got into it, and I'm very passionate about it, and I'm very keen to to share that passion with other people. And that's one of the reasons why for a long time I've wanted to arrange a get-together of sound recording enthusiasts, people interested in sound recording, and I will be giving a report back on that workshop get-together in the Karoo. But yeah, it was a dream come true, and I'd really hope that many more folk would get involved in sound recording. It's a wonderful add-on to bird watching. As Etienne said, it's not bird watching alone. You don't just watch, you listen and you hear as well. And I can't imagine birding without the sound component.
Thanks very much, Rick. Yeah, great. Look, and I think also to emphasize that you don't need fancy equipment to make bird recordings, to make recordings. I've been saying to a lot of people, if you're out in the field and you encounter something, your phone, you can just use your phone. You know, Nicolene Boyens, who was on our sound weekend this weekend, just showed how you just make a video. You don't have to film anything. You can just film the bush, but a video, and just about any camera has a video function. So if there's something you're not sure of, just you know, record. Even the most basic recording is sometimes very valuable. And you don't need, you really don't need fancy equipment. So I'm going to share screen again, and I think we're going to finish off by just having some, you know, just some guidelines on how to improve your sound birding and your sound, you know, some ideas about how to learn bird sounds better. This webinar wasn't intended as a course on that, and I'm hoping to team up with Rick and to do a proper course. We've been talking about it for a while on Southern African bird sound, maybe with some other contributors as well to that process. So just watch the space on Learn the Birds. But I think just in terms of wrapping up, I'm going to cover some material that I've included in various courses. You know, I run courses on LBJs and LBJs and warblers. And those are two groups where really the identification of these groups is fundamentally rooted in sound mastery of sound. So, you know, with that, let's go and share the screen again and see if I'm getting the commands right now.
Etienne, can I just check, will there be a chance for me just to give a quick overview of the sound recording workshop?
Yeah, do you want to do that now, Rick? Actually, maybe just climb in there. Sorry, you did mention it, but
yeah, I've got a few photographs, and if you don't mind, it won't have the Learn the Birds branding and everything. I'm just going to share just a selection of 16 photographs, just chat about that get together.
Yeah, okay, great.
If that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'll just try and share my screen. Are you seeing a picture of me?
There we go. Absolutely. Yes, that looks great. I can see you.
Okay. This is a much younger me. This is a much younger me taken in the Karkloof. This is soon after I'd started with my mini disc recorder, which you can see in my left hand, and the Broden parabolic, and you know, a set of headphones that I was listening to. And yeah, forest birds are very special. And I thoroughly enjoy you know, the sounds of the birds of the forest. So that's a special thing. So that's just by way of introduction. Okay, then why is this not? Sorry. Okay, can you see that, Etienne, Derek?
Yes, we can see it.
All okay, great.
Blue sky, yeah.
Yes, well, that's the whole idea. As I mentioned earlier, I've for some time been wanting to, yeah, either facilitate or be part of a get together of sound recording enthusiasts. Not only people who do sound recording, but also people who are interested in sound. And so I decided on some dates and decided on a venue and got in touch with a few of my friends who I know enjoy sound and sound recording. And lo and behold, in the middle of October, the first sort of, if I can call it, inaugural nature sound recording get-together stroke workshop took place just north of Hanover at a place called New Home in the Karoo. And these are just some of the habitats that we had at our disposal to do recording. Now, the whole idea of this get-together was just to provide an opportunity for us to immerse ourselves in everything related to sound, to share a common passion, to talk about recording techniques, but also, most importantly, to have opportunity to actually do sound recording. And we had a number of different areas and habitats to do that. This is along the shoreline of a fairly large dam on the property. And yeah, within a very short time, this is sheep farming country. So many of the soundscapes and recordings that were done by the attendees down near the dam have got sheep bleating in the background. But hey, that's part of the soundscape. So we took that. But what a lovely area, and a lot of waterside birds. We had blue cranes roosting in the dam. You know, at night, and then early in the morning they would leave with that beautiful sound of blue cranes, flocks of blue cranes taking off and flying overhead, as well as bush birds, Karoo bush birds, and birds of these, you know, of these shorelines, these short grazed shorelines. And then lovely dry grasslands. It was quite dry and barren in the Karoo, but still the tranquility of this place just lends itself wonderfully to tremendous soundscapes. Imagine early in the morning having family groups of blue korans calling to one another, Karoo korans piping in, and then the occasional northern black koran as well, and throw in to the mix displaying melodious larks, red-capped larks, eastern clapper larks, large-billed larks, and the like. And then, of course, the blue cranes flying over, and the odd little low, you know, ultrasonic booming sound of the Ludwig's bustard, you know, in the distance. So a fantastic place to actually do the sound recording. We also went to a neighboring farm which had more rocky hillsides and rocky areas and cliffs. And this is just a view from one of those sort of rocky hillsides. And they provided a new set of, a suite of bird species to record as well. Here, a picture of Lynette Rudman and Tim Cockcroft recording the displaying melodious larks and eastern clapper larks in the grassland early on one of the mornings. And here we have Derek and Sarah Solomon with the parabolic mic mounted on a tripod, and they're sitting and listening to the recording of birds along the Sequoia River in reed beds and open water. And this was also early in the morning. So quite a few of the folk who were there focused on soundscapes, and they would just let their recorders record for up to an hour at a time, and then they would analyze those, and they've posted some of the recordings that they made of individual species subsequent to the workshop. This is just a picture of the group. This is a little deck that's built out over this, what we call the hippo pool. There's a bull hippo in this. It is the Sequoia River after all. And just a few of the people we had, as I said, Derek and Sarah Solomon. Derek has been recording nature sounds for decades, and he came all the way from Hoedspruit to be with us. Chris Hines also has a home in Hoedspruit, and he traveled down from Johannesburg, a very keen interest in sound. This person on the right is Neville Smithers, who is the Broden man. So he makes these microphones. Tony Archer here on the right, and this is John and Moira Randall, who were not sound recordists, but very, very keen birders. And we had a wonderful social time as well. So it was all in all just a fantastic time. Here we have Neville telling us about the technical side of microphones and sound and recording, and it was fascinating to have a really in-depth technical discussion that all of us as lay people could understand, and to have a good display of different microphones, different recording setups. And so during the hotter times of the day when we weren't recording out in the field, we got together in the reception and dining area at New Home and learnt all about the more technical aspects. And that was really, really worthwhile. And that's the group, all of us together. It was a small group. I think there were 12 of us, but it was a very, very good time together, and wonderful to have been able to share this opportunity of just, as I said, getting immersed in sound and everything to do with sound. As I said, we also had wonderful social times. One of those was a braai on the shoreline of the dam at sunset, and PC Ferreira and his family were really hospitable hosts, and which added tremendously to the enjoyment of the get-together. Just some of the folk. This is Chris Hines at the farm on that rocky hillside. So just Chris there, and here we have from left to right, Les and Neville Smith. And Moira Randall. And Tim Cocroft. It was great to have Tim as part of the get-together. I had to twist his arm quite strongly to get him to come, but it was wonderful having Tim with us. He's really very well known in his neck of the woods down in the Eastern Cape around Port Alfred for his fantastic knowledge of birds, and particularly of the sounds that they make. And yeah, that's so to wrap up, we had a very, very successful time. Lots of nice sound recordings, nice for people to meet one another, and I think that new friends were made. And the way forward, well, we'd very much like to have this as an annual event, and we'll travel it around the country. So we're looking for other venues where we can host a similar event in other parts of the country. But we'd also like to really encourage the small groups of sound recordists or people interested in sound recording in the different parts of the country to get together and go on sound recording outings, whether it be for a morning or for a weekend, just to spread the word and get out there recording sounds. It's great fun. You get to meet wonderful people, and it adds tremendously to this wonderful hobby of birding. And I think that's me. I'm going to stop sharing there, Etienne. yeah, hopefully that's brought me back and my screen is no longer shared.
Yes, thanks, Rick.
So thanks for the
really
opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. Really very interesting. And I'm wondering if maybe we shouldn't be also thinking of some sort of sound recording challenge where we challenge people to submit their sounds to Zeno Canto from all over the country. You know, we've got, I know some of the leading guys that are recording, like Anthony Archer, but Lynette's done a lot. You've done a lot. Derek Solomon, who was at your workshop, he submitted. I mean, when you look on Zeno Canto, you see a lot of his stuff from all over the subcontinent. I'm lagging way behind. I've got tons of stuff still to process. But yeah, look, I think, you know, it should be, because the thing about sound recording and submitting them to a public repository like that is it's a real investment in knowledge and research. People can listen to those sounds, they can learn from them, and I'd encourage everyone here, get to know Zeno Canto. Don't just rely on your app. You know, unfortunately, the sound apps we have only have 1 or 2 examples. And I think a lot of them also, they make the mistake, and I was talking at my sound workshop weekend now, just the other day, we're listening to some of the sounds, they're over-processed. In other words, they apply too much noise reduction in not the right way, and it actually distorts the sound slightly. And I'm of the view that a lot of the sound recognition that goes on, the pattern recognition, is subconscious. So we're listening to, we can hear very, very minute differences in tone and timbre. And if you cut out a certain component of a bird call or a bird song, we might not even be, and certainly the non-birding people who might be sound engineers wouldn't have a clue, but that actually affects your ability to recognize that particular sound quality in the future. So yeah, that's very important.
Definitely.
Move on.
If I can just make just comment on that, Etienne, just to say that, you know, one of the aspects that we'll be looking at is you know, including in our courses presentations on using you know, the various sound analysis software that's available. There are a number of you know, free versions of software available that can do most of the stuff that's necessary, and you know, how to visualize things. So there's so much, you know, we chatted very briefly about this at the workshop, but I think that in amongst the sound recording group community that exists at the moment, there's already quite a lot of knowledge and experience, and anybody who's, you know, who might be interested in this, please, you know, get in touch with us and let us know. And also, you're probably going to say it as well, but anybody who's participating in this webinar, if you've got ideas of things you'd like us to cover, in particular, anything to do with sound, I know that identifying birds by sound is important, and Etienne's going to talk a little bit more about that now. But anything, I think that it would be wonderful for this to be the start of a series on sound and sound appreciation and whatever we can do with sound, and you know, to make it more meaningful to us.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I'm going to share screen again, and then just finish off with some of my material from my sound course very briefly. It's not meant to be in depth, and I apologize for not playing more sounds, but I had a bit of a problem converting MP3s to WAV files, because this particular thing seems to only play WAV files, and all my stuff's in MP3. But anyway, we will definitely do this again and talk more about sound. But I'm going to share my screen again, and I think now what have I got zoomed there? Shift F5. So just on learning bird sound, a variety of approaches. So, you know, I think if we think about people learning sound, and you think of all the sound courses, a lot of people have been on different sound courses and they've attended workshops. So there are a whole variety of different approaches that people use. So one of them is phonetics or mnemonics. So phonetics are human-made sounds that mimic the sound. So the brew goes, brrr, brrr, you know, that's a phonetic thing that and if you actually do it out loud and you have the physical experience of doing this, it's always better than just doing it softly. And then what image or ideas the sound bring to mind? Listen carefully to a sound and let it evoke in you whatever association comes to mind. So for me, cloud cisticola and wing snapping cisticola. The cloud is an upbeat, jolly bird. It's got a fast pace, whereas wing snapping is somewhat more mournful and melancholy. It sort of gives the idea of someone sitting on a stoop listening to music on a Sunday afternoon, very relaxed, very slow. And then mnemonics, what does the bird say? Red-eyed dove, I am a red-eyed dove, or black-collared barber, too puddly, too puddly, too puddly. Or I love peri-peri chicken in the case of Cokie Franklin. Those are the mnemonics. And then there's this whole area of the language of sound. So when we actually can describe a sound in technical terms and say the pitch rose and then dropped, and the sound had a hind leg. In other words, the sound went up and then it dropped down. And we use imagery in the form of sonograms to actually visualize some of these things. So what a bird sound actually looks like. And I think, people have a lot to gain by looking at sonograms. We haven't covered them here today, but to visualize what a sound pattern is. And then I think something that's very important that I'm sort of basically talking about as an additional approach, something that I think is fundamental to learning bird sounds, and something that I think experienced birders do automatically, and that is to audibilize the sounds, so that when you hear something, you can replay it in your sound. So if you see something, you visualize it. If you hear something, you audibilize it. You replay it in your head, and you get used to doing this. And when you're doing that, you're actually capturing the pattern. And then you can, once you've got that pattern, in a sense, as a cognitive pattern that you've stored, you can then associate it with the images of the bird or video clip of the bird. The more different associations you have, the habitat, the smell of the place, the feel of the heat down in the Katahdin when you're listening to that white-chested Alethea, as many things as you can bring together, the better. And so basically, I think a combination of all these approaches, whether it's phonetics, whether it's imagery, whether it's visual representations of the sound, and using audibilizing and imagination to capture the sound, all work together in terms of learning sound. But the important thing is, for me, is to start small and learn the birds around one. If you have a lot of bird sound in your mind already, like familiar birds, I was challenged years ago to be able to tell the difference in the notes of house sparrow, grey-headed sparrow, and Cape sparrow. So that's a challenge, and you can learn that around you, and then you're creating a foundation where you can actually start distinguishing maybe contact calls of sunbirds and warblers. Make up your own phonetics. So if you can think of the noises that you make in your mouth, or try and mimic the sounds with your physical capability, the more you do it spontaneously, the better. Talk about the sound to yourself. Say it out loud. It's a deep hooting sound that sounds very gruff and almost hoarse in the case of a Vero's eagle owl. Make up your own mnemonics. Invent mnemonics. A lot of the best mnemonics come when you get a lot of people together and you listen to sound, and you basically then just get creative about what the birds are saying. And I think it's very important. Don't get rusty. Rick was talking about birders getting rusty. And that's because they don't listen enough. We sort of think that bird sound is something we only sort of open up when we go on that birding trip. But whatever environment you're in, you have an opportunity to listen every single day, and that stimulates the neurons and the neuron networks. And just another point that I believe is, don't try and intellectualize sound too much. You have to kind of absorb yourself in the sound and let it be something close to the emotion, a basic level pattern recognition. So just an example. What could be the first sounds I lift. Then stop it. Okay. So for me, play that sound in your head. think I'm going to have to go. This carries on playing. I go back. The white-fronted bee-eater, I visualize the river, the hot weather in the Kruger, the riverine banks south of the Sabi River, the smell of the buffalo dung, everything that you can associate with that sound is what you associate with that sound. And the more associations you have, the better, bringing in your emotions. And then the challenge of filtering. So here's a little a sound clip, one of Rick's sound clips. I think lots of different sounds here. You might have to put up your volume to hear it well. But it's a lot of different sounds. I'm not sure if you can hear that.
Yeah, I can hear it.
So essentially, so the slide on, I don't want to take up, we've gone over time, so I want to move on a little bit. But the slide on filtering is essentially saying that you hear a lot of noise, and what you have to practice doing is focusing your mind on specific sounds. So if you listen for 5 minutes a day and you listen to all the sound, what master birders do is they can pick out, they can move their mind, the focus of their mind like a ray of light into the sound medley, and they can pick up on the Nuttall spurfowl, the white-bellied sunbird, the rattling cisticola, the distant sound of a cuckoo, and you can move your attention from one to another. And filtering is very important because it enables you to pick out the specific sounds. And what I think is very interesting about this, I'm going to move on. Sorry, I'm going to just go back there. I've seemed to have lost one of my slides, which I want to go back to. What I was saying was that the process of hearing a lot of sounds is, if you don't know a particular sound or it's unfamiliar, you tend not to pick it out of the chorus. You tend to only pick out the sounds that you're familiar with. And experienced birders will have an idea in their mind as what they want to hear, say as a tour leader in a particular area. And that particular sound will spring out from the bedlam, even when they're not concentrating on it. They will just notice it because they've pre-programmed themselves to hear that in advance. So the whole process of filtering is important, and it's good practice to learn to focus in different areas, but it will also enable you to pick out the sounds that you really want to pick up, whether it's that special bird or whatever. So that's basically almost the end of my presentation, but just by way of closing, I want to talk about the thrill of discovery, you know, that sometimes sound leads you to remarkable places. And in the case of me, in 2017, I used this little Olympus handheld recorder to record this bird, which I didn't know what it was at the time. And it turned out to be based purely on a 40-second clip on this Olympus handheld recorder. This bird turned out to be Forbes Watson Swift. So we've written the paper up. It's got a lot of detail on sound analysis, sonograms, comparison of different swift species and different swift screams to basically prove that the sound I recorded in Mozambique in 2017 is a Forbes Watson Swift. So just look out for that. It'll be in the British Ornithologists Club, the bulletin, which comes out, I think, in December. So it'll be there. So basically, I think that's basically all from us, or all from my side. I don't know if Rick, if there's anything you want to add at this stage. I'm going to move on to what's coming up. But I think before we do that, perhaps we can take questions.
Can I just add one thing? And I think, you know, there have been a few questions about learning about bird calls, and a bit of advice that I referred to when I introduced myself and how I got interested in birding. it's something that I learned at a young age, and I've passed it on to whoever I can. And that is, if you hear something you don't know, you don't recognize. And that ties in with everything that I've spoken about and Etienne's spoken about, the association, the process, the reinforcement of where you are, of fighting through that forest undergrowth, trying to find those knocking sounds. And so that's if you take anything away from this webinar, let it be something like this. If you don't recognize a sound that you're hearing, go and find it. That's my passing shot.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rick. Have we got questions? I'm just looking at the chat. Derek, are you? I didn't see everything. Are there some questions that haven't been answered?
Sorry, I've been listening so closely. I haven't been watching the questions. I'm falling down on my job.
I think there's some suggestion. There's the questions about more sound workshops, lesser skilled birders. I think absolutely. I think we must look at doing more of this and doing it in different formats and doing more sound discussion about sound and more sound courses as well. And I think certainly at Learn the Birds, the plan was for this just to be an introduction to the whole area, and we're going to develop some more material and bring more stuff with more bird sounds. I think comments, that's someone suggests that we have a place to share soundscapes, which I think one can do on Zeno Canto. And maybe what one needs to do there is ask Zeno Canto if we can set up a page just for Southern African soundscapes and dawn choruses, because otherwise they're hard to find. You have to look on the individual person's profile. Perhaps we can look at that. You've replied to Letitia there. Many thanks. I think Stefan Tablanche talking about atlasing being impossible without sounds. So I think those are the questions. Any other questions? We can take more questions if there are.
So this is not a question from me, but I think it's something that we must do in terms of Learn the Birds, is to actually get courses on sound recognition that people can follow at their own pace and go back to when they want to, because the challenge with the webinars and sound is it's very fleeting and it's difficult for people to go. Yeah, it's too fast. But whereas if we have the thing as an asynchronous course and people can spend as much time as they want and go back to it as often as they want, I think it will be it will be a better experience. Yeah,
no, absolutely, I agree with that. I think having said all of that, I think we're going to finish then. But before I close, I'm just going to just go back to screen sharing and just tell you what we've got at Learn the Birds coming up soon. If you just bear with me again. So basically that's tomorrow. This is a masterclass by Ernest Porter. It's been rerun. It was very well received. Apparently an excellent masterclass. And then that's followed, I think I've missed one, haven't I?
Yeah, there's the raptor one, the raptors in flight, I think was the one.
Sorry. The one that's coming is tomorrow. That's tomorrow. The 9th is masterclass for photographing raptors. It's fantastic. Anyone is interested in photographing raptors and in photography in general. Sorry. And then we've got on the week after 26, we've got the Lightroom, which is how to use Lightroom and the workflow process, again by Ernest Porter. He really gives nice webinars. And then he's doing Photoshop and other plugins, advanced photo editing on the 3rd. And then we have Leon Marais doing Birds and Birding in Eastern South Africa, which is a nice overview of all the treasures of birding in Eastern South Africa. And then moving to the north, we've got Lancy Cheng and Jared Clark doing Winter in Newfoundland and Labrador. Both very seasoned bird guides, tour leaders, very, very incredibly well informed and very good and entertaining speakers as well. So that's what's on for from Learn the Birds. And if you haven't registered, please go online and register and join us. There's a newsletter that comes out every Monday, which tells you what's on. And thank you very much to Rick and to Lynette for being here tonight and sharing your insights and wisdom. And thank you everyone for attending. So all the best, and we hope to see you again soon in the field. Good night.
Thanks a lot, guys. Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much. Great to have been a part of it. Thanks a lot, Etienne. Thanks, Derek.
Right, good. Cheers. Bye.